Daniel Harrington did not sit on public benches. At least, that was what his assistant would have said. At 52, Daniel had built Harrington Global into one of the most powerful investment firms in the country. His name appeared in financial magazines. His handshake moved markets. His schedule was booked 6 weeks in advance. He owned 3 homes, a private jet, a reputation for precision and discipline. What he did not own, though few dared to say it, was rest. That evening in Chicago, the wind cut sharply through Millennium Park. The city lights shimmered against the lake, and the clouds hung low and heavy like they were thinking about rain. Daniel had just walked out of a board meeting that felt more like a battlefield. Inside the glass tower behind him, executives were arguing about layoffs, numbers, margins, restructuring. Across the table, his chief financial officer, Margaret Collins, had tried to meet his eyes. "We can't cut another 300 people before the holidays," she had said quietly. "We can," Daniel had replied evenly. "And we will." The vote had passed, but something about the silence that followed lingered with him long after the meeting ended. Now he stood outside, his overcoat buttoned tightly, his phone buzzing in his pocket. He ignored it, for once. He began walking without direction, past tourists, street musicians, and couples laughing beneath glowing street lamps. He hadn't walked without purpose in years. Then he saw the bench, and he saw the man sitting on it. The man's coat was worn thin, sleeves frayed at the edges. His beard was streaked with gray, but his posture was straight, almost dignified. A small backpack rested at his feet. Daniel would normally have passed without noticing, but the bench was the only empty place nearby, and he was suddenly tired. So he sat. He left one cushion of space between them. Silence stretched for several seconds. Then the man spoke. "Cold night to be carrying the weight of the world." Daniel turned slightly. "I beg your pardon?" The man didn't look at him. His eyes were fixed on the skyline. "You're thinking about something heavy," he said calmly. "Most men in suits at this hour are." Daniel almost smiled. Almost. "You make a habit of profiling strangers?" "No," the man said gently. "I make a habit of observing pain." Daniel stiffened. "I'm not in pain." The man nodded, as if that answer was expected. "Of course you aren't." A pause. Then, surprisingly, Daniel said, "And what makes you qualified to recognize it?" Now the man turned. His eyes were clear, sharp, intelligent. "I used to teach psychology at Northwestern," he said. 25 years. Daniel blinked. "And now?" "Now," the man said lightly. "I teach myself humility." That caught Daniel's attention. "What happened?" The man extended a hand. "Thomas Reed." Daniel hesitated, then shook it. "Daniel." Thomas didn't ask for his last name. "Life happened," Thomas said simply. "Wife died. Medical bills stacked. I made poor investments trying to recover. Lost the house, lost perspective. And somewhere in between, I lost myself." Daniel studied him more carefully now. This wasn't the slurred rambling of a drunk man. This was measured, controlled. "How long have you been out here?" Daniel asked. 3 years. "And no one helped?" Thomas smiled faintly. "People help in the ways that make them comfortable. $1, a sandwich, a prayer." He looked at Daniel. "Very few sit." The wind grew stronger. Daniel felt something shift inside him. "So why are you sitting here tonight?" Thomas asked. Daniel hesitated, because for the first time in years, he didn't know the answer. "I suppose," Daniel said finally. "I needed air." Thomas nodded. "Air helps." Silence returned, but this time it felt different. Less defensive. Across the park, a young woman struggled to set up a small art display against the wind. Her paintings kept tipping over. Thomas noticed her immediately. "She's here most Fridays," he said. "Her name's Lily." Daniel followed his gaze. "She sells enough to eat?" "Some nights," Thomas said. "Other nights she pretends she did." Daniel frowned. "How do you know that?" Thomas's voice softened. "Because I've seen her give her last sale to the violinist over there when his daughter got sick." Daniel's eyes shifted toward a man playing a soft melody near the fountain. "That man?" Daniel asked. Thomas nodded. "Michael. Used to play in a city orchestra. Car accident damaged his hand. Now he plays here." Daniel felt something uncomfortable in his chest. Stories. So many stories walking past him every day, stories he never heard. He was about to stand when Thomas spoke again. "Can I tell you something, Daniel?" Daniel paused. "I once counseled a young entrepreneur. Brilliant mind, ruthless discipline. He built something extraordinary. But he couldn't sleep, couldn't laugh, couldn't sit still." Daniel's jaw tightened. "What happened to him?" "He came to me because his daughter stopped speaking to him." Daniel's breath hitched slightly. Thomas didn't notice, or pretended not to. "He thought success would make her proud," Thomas continued, "but all she wanted was time." Daniel stared at the skyline. His daughter, Emily, hadn't answered his last 4 calls. She was 23 now, lived in Seattle, worked for a non-profit, something Daniel privately considered financially irresponsible. Their last conversation had ended with her saying, "You don't listen, Dad, you only calculate." Thomas leaned back against the bench. "You can earn back money," he said quietly. "But missed moments? Those collect interest in regret." Daniel stood abruptly. "I should go." Thomas nodded. "Of course." Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out his wallet. Thomas held up a hand. "No, it's just money," Daniel said. "I know," Thomas replied gently. "That's why I don't want it." Daniel froze. "I don't need to feel useful," Thomas added. "I need to feel human." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Daniel slowly put his wallet away. "Then what do you need?" he asked. Thomas looked toward Lily, still fighting the wind with her paintings. "Conversation," he said. "Respect. And maybe someone to notice the others too." Daniel followed his gaze again. The violinist, the artist, a woman pushing a cart full of blankets toward a small group huddled near the trees. "How do you stay—" Daniel searched for the word. "Calm?" Thomas supplied. "Yes?" Thomas's eyes reflected the city lights. "Because when you lose everything," he said softly, "you finally see what matters." Daniel stood there longer than he intended. The phone in his pocket buzzed again. He ignored it. For the first time in years, Daniel Harrington did not feel powerful. He felt small and, strangely, relieved. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Daniel asked. Thomas smiled. "I'm usually somewhere. That's not what I asked." Thomas considered him. "Yes," he said. "I'll be here." Daniel nodded once. Then he walked away. But he did not walk back toward his tower. Instead, he walked toward the young woman struggling with her paintings. Thomas watched him go, a faint smile forming beneath his beard. The wind grew colder. But something else had shifted in the night. And Daniel Harrington did not yet realize that this bench, this simple cracked wooden bench, would become the dividing line between the man he had been and the man he was about to become. Daniel Harrington had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions with less hesitation than he felt walking toward a girl selling paintings in the wind. The young woman was kneeling on the pavement, trying to keep her canvases from falling over again. A gust swept through the park, knocking 2 frames flat. Daniel instinctively bent down and caught one before it hit a puddle. "Careful," she said quickly, brushing strands of brown hair out of her face. "That one took me 3 weeks." He handed it back gently. It was a painting of the Chicago skyline at dusk, but not the polished version tourists photographed. This one showed the underside of bridges, the tired glow of street lamps, the shadows beneath the towers. It was beautiful in a way that felt honest. "You're talented," Daniel said. She looked up at him cautiously. "Thank you." Her voice carried exhaustion. "You sell many?" he asked. She hesitated. "Enough." It was the same answer Thomas had implied earlier. Daniel glanced at the small handwritten sign. Original artwork, $40. $40. Daniel had once spent more than that on a single cup of specialty coffee at an airport lounge. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily Grant." "I'm Daniel." "Nice to meet you, Daniel." She returned to adjusting her display, clearly accustomed to conversations that led nowhere. He surprised himself. "I'll take this one," he said, holding up the skyline painting. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You don't want to see the others?" "I like this one." She studied him carefully, as if trying to determine whether he was serious. "That'll be 40, she said. Daniel reached for his wallet, then paused. He pulled out a $100 bill and handed it to her. I don't have change for that, she said quickly. That's fine. She stiffened. I don't do pity sales, she said quietly. He felt the words like a reprimand. It's not pity, Daniel replied, choosing his tone carefully. It's value. Lily held his gaze for several seconds. Then she slowly accepted the bill. Thank you, she said. And this time, it carried weight. As Daniel turned to leave, he heard a soft violin melody rising from across the park. The music was tender, almost fragile, not flashy, not loud, but deliberate. He followed the sound. The violinist Michael Carter stood beneath a street lamp, coat collar turned up against the cold. His violin case lay open at his feet with a handful of bills and coins inside. His left hand trembled slightly as he played. Daniel noticed immediately. The tremor wasn't from the cold. It was injury. The melody shifted into something haunting, something that made Daniel slow his steps. Several people passed without stopping. One couple dropped $1 and kept walking. Daniel remained. When the song ended, Michael lowered the violin and flexed his fingers carefully. That was beautiful, Daniel said. Michael smiled faintly. Thank you. You trained professionally. It wasn't a question. Michael nodded. Chicago Philharmonic, 12 years. What happened? Michael glanced at his left hand. Drunk driver, he said simply. Reconstruction surgery saved the hand, but not the precision. Daniel felt the familiar urge to offer money and walk away. Instead, he asked, Do you still love it? Michael's answer came without hesitation. Yes. That single word struck Daniel harder than he expected. Yes, despite everything. Why play out here? Daniel asked. Michael's smile softened. My daughter loves hearing me practice. When she's at school, I play here so she doesn't see the hard days. Daniel's chest tightened. How old is she? 8. Her name's Sophie. As if summoned by her name, a small figure came running from the direction of the fountain. Dad! Sophie threw her arms around Michael's waist. She wore a purple knit hat slightly too big for her head. Daniel watched the man kneel carefully to hug her. You finished homework? Michael asked. Yes, Mrs. Patterson says I read faster than anyone. That's my girl. Daniel swallowed something heavy. He thought of Emily at 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with math worksheets, looking up at him hopefully while he checked emails. He remembered saying, Not now, sweetheart. He had said it often, too often. Sophie noticed Daniel staring. Are you famous? She asked bluntly. Michael laughed. Sophie. Daniel surprised himself by smiling. No, he said softly. Just visiting. Sophie studied him like a detective. You look important. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Michael's eyes met his, and for a brief second there was something like understanding between them. Important. Yes, but not in the ways that mattered here. The woman with the cart. As Daniel walked away from the violinist and his daughter, he noticed the woman pushing the cart Thomas had mentioned earlier. She was moving slowly, handing out blankets to 3 older men seated near the trees. Daniel approached cautiously. Do you need help? He asked. The woman looked up. She was in her late 40s, face lined, not from age, but from years of effort. Her name tag read, Grace Holloway, Community Outreach. I always need help, she replied with a tired smile. He took one end of the cart and helped her steady it. They worked quietly for a few minutes, distributing blankets and small paper cups of soup. One of the men, a former construction worker named Ray, thanked Grace with watery eyes. Bless you, Ray murmured. Daniel felt invisible for the first time in his adult life. And strangely, it didn't frighten him. When they finished, Grace leaned against the cart. You're not one of my regular volunteers, she observed. No. What brought you out tonight? Daniel glanced back toward the bench. I met someone. Grace followed his gaze and immediately nodded. Thomas. You know him. Of course, he refuses shelter beds half the time. Says he prefers the stars. Daniel almost laughed. That sounds like him. Grace studied Daniel more closely now. You're not just passing through, she said. Something's bothering you. Daniel considered denying it, but he was tired of denying things. I laid off 300 employees tonight, he said quietly. Grace didn't flinch. And I told myself it was necessary. Was it? He hesitated. Yes. She tilted her head slightly. Necessary and humane aren't always the same thing. Her words echoed Margaret's from earlier. Daniel exhaled slowly. I built a company that employs thousands, he said defensively. And that's admirable, Grace replied calmly. But do you know their names? He didn't answer. Grace didn't need him to. Thomas once told me something, she continued. He said the opposite of poverty isn't wealth, it's connection. Daniel felt that sentence settle somewhere deep. Good night, Mr. Harrington, he said automatically. Grace's expression changed slightly. Harrington Global. He nodded. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. Not awe, not admiration. Awareness. Well, she said gently, maybe tonight you're just Daniel. He didn't know why that felt like relief. The return to the bench. Daniel walked back toward the bench where Thomas still sat. The older man looked up as he approached. You met them, Thomas said simply. Yes. And? Daniel sat again, this time without leaving space between them. They all carry something, Daniel said quietly. Thomas nodded. So do you. Daniel stared at the skyline. I thought success would simplify life, he admitted. Instead, it complicated everything. Thomas's voice was steady. What did it cost you? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He thought of Emily. He thought of Margaret's disappointed eyes in the boardroom. He thought of the way Lily refused pity. It cost me softness, he said finally. Thomas smiled faintly. Softness isn't weakness, Daniel. It's awareness. They sat in silence again. The wind slowed. Somewhere in the distance, Michael began playing another melody. After several minutes, Daniel spoke. What would you do? He asked. If you had the chance to rebuild. Thomas didn't look at him. I wouldn't rebuild the house, he said. I'd rebuild the relationships inside it. Daniel felt that one. Deeply. The phone in his pocket buzzed again. This time he pulled it out. 23 missed calls. Emails stacking by the minute. He stared at the screen. Then, for the first time in his adult life, he powered it off. Thomas glanced sideways at him. That's a start. Daniel exhaled. He had spent decades climbing. Tonight, for the first time, he was sitting. Really sitting. Will you tell me your full story? Daniel asked. Thomas considered him. Yes, he said. But only if you promise something. What? That you won't try to rescue me. Daniel frowned. Why not? Because I'm not your redemption project. Thomas replied gently. If you're going to change, do it because you see people. Not because you want to fix them. Daniel nodded slowly. That's fair. Thomas leaned back. Then let me tell you about the night I lost everything. And as the city lights shimmered against the dark water, the homeless man began to speak.